All right, IU fans, Indiana's football team's taking care of business, right? They needed to handle Indiana State, FCS team. They needed to take out the Sycamores in a Friday night game where we should have all been at high school football contests, apparently. Indiana made quick work of Indiana State. Matt and I needed to see this team score points early and often. They did that. They also gave some points to Indiana State. But overall, the Hoosiers did snag their first victory of the season. Now, the degree of difficulty gets turned up again. Indiana got the Ohio State matchup to start the year, Indiana State week 2, and now Louisville, a non-conference team that we're fired up to watch the Hoosiers take on. Of course, the basketball program, the men's side, also had 3 big-time show-stopping visits over the weekend in Bloomington. Matt and I are going to discuss Liam McNeeley, Derik Queen, as well as Curtis Gibbons the third. Football, men's basketball, we got a jam-packed podcast episode for you. All of that and so much more here on episode 306 of the Hoosiers Sound, where we are the official podcast of Indiana HQ. We're recording this edition of the Hoosiers Sound on Monday, September 11th, 2023, where I'm your host, Nathan Christian. Here with me tonight is my normal co-host, Matt Lukens. Matt, 9/11, we remember, we'll never forget the tough days back in 2001 when we were both much, much younger than we are today. But as far as this football team is concerned, the Hoosiers and the Sycamores did battle on Friday night, and QB1 needed to step up, and he stepped up. Matt, what are your immediate takeaways and observations from IU's blowout victory over Indiana State from Friday night?
Based on the performances from Friday night and Friday night alone, how the staff was confused on who was quarterback one baffles me. Now, of course, I know that when you play football, right, some people are just practice players, right? They're just better in practice because they're used to playing against the same guys. They kind of just know people's tendencies, sure, right? And so you end up, playing better in a private setting than when you're playing against people that, you study on film and you kind of have to prepare for. But irregardless, I don't know how this was even a question coming into the game. But Tayven Jackson stepped up. He took the questions, right? He was being questioned, took it on the chin, and just showed out, balled out. And that's all you can do when you're put in that situation. So good for Tayven, and it's good for the team. I mean, we knew that when he transferred in from Tennessee that he was going to be the guy. Then we hear all about Peyton Sorsby.
Brendan Sorsby. Peyton, I know Peyton is Baby's cousin or something.
I'm thinking about Peyton
Ramsey, of course.
Peyton Ramsey, yes. But when Sorsby transferred, you think that it's it's obvious, right? Yeah. And it should have always been obvious. But at the end of the day, the staff tried to make it complicated. It should have never been complicated, right? Not in a million years should this have been a complicated decision. It is Tayven's team. It's clearly Tayven's spot. So I don't know why we're even. And now why we're even debating.
Hey, look! Now it's time. To Tom Allen's credit, he did come out earlier this morning, and say, "Look, we've reviewed everything we needed to review. It's Tayven Jackson going forward, barring
if he hadn't said that.
Events. Well, Nathan, Matt, he could have. I'm telling you, he could have said, "Look, we came to a decision, but we don't want to announce it." That's what we've seen from Tom Allen before. There's no debate. There's no discussion.
No, there's no discussion. There's no debate.
There's end of story.
There shouldn't even be we should be done talking about this.
It was end of story.
End of story. It is Tayven Jackson's team. Yeah. This is Tayven Jackson's program now.
And I said this with Dexter Williams last year when Indiana waited something like 8-9 games to put Dexter Williams on the field. It's funny when, this coaching staff is the one that goes out, pursues these players, and then at the end of the day, we sit here and go, what is going on? Now, in this coaching staff's defense, Brendan Sorsby has been in the program longer than Tayven Jackson has. Last year, they decided to play a transfer over the guy that they had in-house for about 3 years. But with that said, Tayven Jackson was called as the starting quarterback going forward here on Monday morning. Jackson on Friday night was 18 of 21 for 236 yards through the air. Didn't record a passing touchdown, but he did total a rushing score on 9 yards on the ground. Matt, at the end of the day, Tayven Jackson has proven himself now as QB1. What are you looking for at a high level the rest of the season? This is a guy that you've already mentioned before. He is mostly someone who's going to stand tall in the pocket, deliver the football. Don't think of him as a scrambly Dexter Williams type. But between now and the end of the year, what are you looking for out of Tayven Jackson? And do you anticipate this to be 1 year where he's in the program, or do you think it's 2+ seasons where he's going to play for the Hoosiers?
It's 2+ seasons where he's going to play for the Hoosiers. I don't see him leaving and just dipping. I don't see him given his brother's legacy here, given the opportunities he's going to be given, and honestly, given the fact that I don't think he's going to have a fantastic season. Like he's not going to have a breaking season this year, so he's not going to be leaving right. because he's doing well,
yeah,
right? He's going to have to stay to get to develop, right? He has the talent to be that guy that takes that jump, right, and shocks the college football world, right? Because they're not used to watching an Indiana QB be good, even though Michael Penix is out there going to win the Heisman this year, hopefully.
Saturday.
But he will be around for a couple of years. We'll get used to him being the QB. That's a good thing. Funny enough, the offense starts 2 4-star QBs, right? You have Tayven Jackson and you have Donovan McCulley, right?
Who also looks good in his own right. He seems to be emerging. You have a sort of a 3.5-star wide receiver as far as Omar Cooper Jr. as well from Lawrence North too. Jalen Lucas's emergence. You saw him tally over 100 yards of total offense against the Sycamores. Cam Camper's a guy that we know is Mr. Reliable out there at the wide receiver position. Someone is going to be a major part of this for the rest of the season. Josh Henderson in the backfield as well. Someone who has a nose for the goal line, can catch the football, run it as well. Indiana's got weapons. Now. Is it Michigan level?
I love the receivers.
And we didn't even discuss DeKeith Carter. We didn't even discuss EJ Williams, right? Now you're seeing an offense that, at least when you look at games against Louisville, against Maryland, against Michigan State, against Illinois, Purdue, you can see a team that can absolutely put points on the board. And bar none, they had to decide a quarterback because, it doesn't take a PhD in football to tell you that not only do you have to have a quarterback that's talented, that can execute the offense, but offensive coordinators build plays upon other plays. So 1st and 10 in the first quarter, a running play sets up something in the second quarter or the third quarter. You want the same quarterback to be carrying out those second and those third level plays as the game goes on. You don't want to be swapping guys in and out. That's just not going to work. Oklahoma State's trying it right now, and it's a bit of a mess. You got to have a team that has a guy. Again, no country's ever succeeded with 2 presidents. No captain has ever succeeded. No ship has ever succeeded with 2 captains. So you want to go out there, have a quarterback, pick your guy going forward. And Tayven Jackson was our guy. We wanted him to win the job. We thought he would win the job. My bold prediction from the Indiana State game was that he would take over in the first quarter, leave no doubt. That's exactly what took place. Matt's, by the way, was that Jalen Lucas is going to be a major thorn in the side of the Sycamores, and he could have gone for about 500 yards in that game if they didn't sort of tone down the pitch count a little bit. And now you see this Hoosier team putting together an offense that you can really get behind. Walt Bell in his second year, the Hoosiers now 1-1 after a 41-7 victory. Man, on the defensive side, we saw IU do a lot of good things once again. Aaron Casey leading the charge. They didn't get
scored on.
In the middle of the defense, it was a shutout performance from the defense specifically. Of course, Jalen Lucas's fumble resulted in 7 for Indiana State. The Sycamores didn't put up 100 yards of offense. They were completely dominated. Indiana State's offense hasn't registered a point yet this season after getting shut out in their opener. But, Matt, overall, you saw 3 levels from the defensive line to the linebackers to the secondary carry out their responsibility. They came out of the game healthy, and now it's full steam ahead into bigger games.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the program is on to bigger things now, right? And bigger games, which is... It's showtime. I mean, you got to show it on the national stage, right? They got to do it. And this is their time.
And I feel like I may have ruffled some feathers back on Friday night into Saturday morning, throwing out PFF grades related to Tayven Jackson. And my only point there is I'm not here telling all of you that Tayven Jackson's a better quarterback than Michael Penix Jr. What I am saying is when you put everything on the table, if Indiana was still unsure about who their QB1 was after Friday night, there were going to be some deeper issues. And that was the entire genesis of the couple tweets that were sent out across Friday night and Saturday morning. Tayven Jackson individually against an FCS opponent did objectively do better than Michael Penix Jr. did against Eastern Illinois or against Idaho. 2021 game against Idaho wasn't all that good looking from an offensive standpoint, even though Indiana won by a million. Tayven Jackson carried out what he had to do in that Walt Bell offense, keeping Indiana State's secondary off guard with throws, I thought, on all three levels, short, intermediate, and deep. And it was good to see
threw
Indiana.
The ball.
And it wasn't the same throw, right? It was left side of the field to the right side. It was short, medium, long. He spread it out to run from running backs to receivers, got the tight ends involved in that game too. So as far as doing what you had to do over the course of 3 hours, green lights, check marks, thumbs ups across the board for this Indiana offense. And now you go ahead to this game against the Louisville Cardinals. It's going to be a noon Eastern tip on Big Ten Network, even though the Cardinals and the Hoosiers will be playing at Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis. The Cardinals are 9.5-point favorites right now with an over-under of 53. Jeff Brom is a Louisville coach, a name that you are all obviously familiar with from his time running the program at Purdue. He wanted to return to his alma mater after last year. Aiden O'Connell went off to the NFL. David Bell, Rondale Moore, Bryson Hopkins, Payne Durham, a lot of quality Boilermakers. George Karlaftis went off to the NFL as well. And Jeff Brom said, hey, let's turn the page here and go to my alma mater. Brian Brom is his offensive coordinator. Mark Hagan, a name familiar to a lot of Hoosier fans as both a player and a coach previously in the program, is a defensive coordinator at Louisville. This Cardinals team, Matt, is quite fascinating. If you ask me, they've got three major strengths: running back, interior offensive line, their edge rushers are really good, but a lot of weaknesses otherwise. It's a classic sort of year one program under a new coach in the ACC. They have a lot of talent. They are 2-0 with a road win at Georgia Tech and an FCS victory. Jack Plummer is the QB. Matt, this game does feel like it's winnable for Indiana, even though Louisville's a justified favorite. What are a couple of high-level things you're looking forward to seeing Saturday as the Hoosiers take on the Cardinals?
I mean, playing a division like a Power 5 program and actually being able to move the ball. Like I'll be the first one to tell you, I don't think Indiana's winning this game. Straight up, I think not only are they the obvious underdogs, I think they're going to come into the game very just behind the 8 ball, right? Straight up. They're going to come in behind the 8 ball, mostly because Louisville has looked good through the first part of the season, and IU, other than last game playing a weaker opponent, hasn't, right? And they showed on tape a lot of the weaknesses against Ohio State, whereas Louisville kind of, has played with their food, even though they kind of struggled in the first half against Georgia Tech. Yeah, so I don't blame them for that either, because that's some first game stuff, right? Whereas Indiana's woes have been, like you can't move the ball at all. And offense just being non-existent, which is beyond me. Anyways, I want to see the offense be able to move the ball, and defense, how do they work with speed? Like we've seen them interact with Ohio State's receivers, right? Who I'm not saying are slow, I'm just not saying are speed guys necessarily, right? Like I don't think
it's really skilled. They're versatile.
They're versatile. Everything. Absolutely versatile, do everything receivers, but they're not speed guys. Like Louisville has legit top level Power 5 speed on their team, whether it's in running back, receiver, slot receiver, quarterback.
They're faster than any Purdue team that I remember under Jeff.
Oh yeah, for sure. And Purdue had Rondale Moore, right? But they're fast.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. And so, no, I totally hear what you're saying from a speed standpoint. Jamari Thrash is a name that all of you should know if you don't already, as far as Louisville's offense is concerned. He had 7 catches for 88 yards and 2 touchdowns in their season opening win at Georgia Tech. And then we talk about their backfield where they have 2 guys that can really do some major damage. Jawar Jordan has had back-to-back awesome performances to start the season. Isaac Guerrero comes over from Wisconsin, a little bit more the between the tackles guy, but still someone who can get away from the defense if he has an opening. Jack Plummer, the quarterback, though, hasn't gotten off to a great start. And if Indiana is going to win this game, the quarterback matchup has to go to the Hoosiers. I think there was a little bit of a, funny sort of narrative note thrown around that, Indiana, Ohio State, Indiana's got the better quarterback. Indiana, Louisville, Indiana's got to win the quarterback matchup. Tayven Jackson's got to make his throws. Walt Bell has to call plays where Louisville's defense is off balance. They're not sure whether Indiana's going to throw the football or run the football. Not sure if it's going to be a direct north-south approach or east-west. Walt Bell's got to keep this Cardinal defense very much uncomfortable over the course of 4 quarters, because we have seen this Louisville defense leak at times. Georgia Tech put up 28 points in 1 quarter in Atlanta when those 2 teams played in week 1. You also saw Murray State, for example. They were a team that, while their performance overall wasn't all that great, they still ended up totaling almost 100 yards on the ground and having some productivity as far as their ground game is concerned. As far as IU's approach, you got to do everything you can to make Jack Plummer uncomfortable. This is somebody who spent 3 years at Purdue. From 2019 to 2021, he didn't face Indiana once. And even though he had a good season in 2019, Aiden O'Connell took the job from him halfway through the season, and the Hoosiers did beat an Aiden O'Connell-led team at Ross-Ade Stadium in 2019. Then, if you fast forward in 2021, after the Hoosiers didn't play Purdue in 2020, it was Aiden O'Connell's show. Jack Plummer went to Cal for a year in the Pac-12 last season, and now followed Jeff Brom to Louisville here for this season. But this is a quarterback that has gotten off to a bit of a shaky start. 2 picks against Murray State.
Yep.
That's not exactly how you give your fan base a lot of hope.
The quarterback play hasn't been great for Louisville, but basically everything else has been.
An inspiration. Right? He also threw a pick at Georgia Tech, but I liked his moxie, his resolve in the second half, bouncing back after his team did dig themselves into a bit of a deficit. They're fast, they're versatile, they're athletic. Matt and I will break this matchup down even further here in just a moment. But first, it's time for Who Won the Week this past week in IU sports. And on Sunday night, in the midst of the New York Giants getting absolutely obliterated by Dallas.
Yeah, they got put on
there was one player on the entire New York Giants roster that decided to show up and play to his expectation, if not exceed his expectation. He was a linebacker who wore number 41. Is Micah McFadden. Of course, all of you must have seen the note by now. McFadden had a career high 11 tackles to lead the Giants on Sunday night. He also was featured in special teams coverage. So not only was he a force on the defensive side of the ball, he was on the field for almost every punt play that the Giants ran, which is about, I think, 36 of them on Sunday night. McFadden was featured quite a bit in the punt team as far as special teams was concerned. All over the place. He was all over the field. PFF loved his performance on Sunday night in the starting linebacker spot, which he won from his play coming out of his rookie season. Don Martindale, their defensive coordinator, has regularly said nice things, uplifting things, optimistic things about Micah McFadden, who was a 5th-round pick for the Giants a couple of years ago in the first year of a new general manager. So there's one silver lining for the Giants after a 40-point loss to divisional rival is that Micah McFadden showed up, and he absolutely won the week. The former Hoosier linebacker, one of the best defensive players to ever go through Bloomington, Indiana. He had a massive performance for the Giants, and they're going to need more from him the rest of the way if they're going to try to dig out of what was a pretty tough night for NYG yesterday in week 1. Overall, folks, if you'd like to subscribe to our podcast for free, all you have to do is search for the Hoosier Sound wherever you listen to podcasts. Stay up to date with all of our information by following us on Twitter at IndianaHQ and at the Hoosier Sound. If you enjoy our show, leave us a review, tell a friend, share our links. Your support really helps us grow this podcast. and reach more passionate IU fans such as yourself. Yeah, folks, Google, YouTube, Micah McFadden. If you are just starting your time at IU, just beginning undergrad life, watch those highlights. A blitzing linebacker, takeaway machine all over the field. Coverage, pass rush, you name it, tackling. He did everything. You think about the linebackers that have come through.
If he hadn't been
if he hadn't been ejected. Yeah. Also, YouTube that first half, second quarter, ridiculous targeting ejection for an absurd overreaction from the refs after he contacted Desmond Ridder. Unbelievable. Totally ridiculous. But look, can't change the past now as much as we'd like to. The Hoosiers, through 2 games, Matt, we asked all the folks out there, through 2 games, what grade would you give this Indiana team? Obviously, knocking off Indiana State the way they did, rough game against Ohio State, but they did cover in both contests. Before we really dig in more into this Louisville game, Matt, what would you give the Hoosiers through 2 contests?
Through 2 contests, I mean, against Ohio State, they kind of got like a B-, right? I mean, for that performance, I mean, offense, if the offense had actually scored a touchdown, I think they might have gotten an A.
Sure,
but
they didn't.
B- given the expectations going into the year. They took care of business against Indiana State. So I'm looking at like a B+, honestly, as far as things have gone. Really, I had very underwhelming expectations of this team. To be fair. But even with those underwhelming expectations, I think they've completely overperformed what I would have thought what they could have even done. Like nobody expected them to go and beat Ohio State game 1. Everybody expected you to beat Indiana State the way you did in game 2.
But you did it, right?
But you did it. You
on the balance of things, and that's why I'm actually going to crank it up even a little more. I've gotten them at an A-. I really liked what they did against Indiana State. I think you're going to see the Sycamores give Ball State a little bit more of an issue than they gave Indiana back on Friday night. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if Sycamores even sort of led the game, after the first quarter, maybe into the second quarter against the Ball State Cardinals coming up, in their next matchup against an FBS team. I think Indiana State's a little bit better than they're showing themselves out to be right now, and I think Indiana's a big reason for that. And the Ohio State game, look, Indiana's defense, I think, is just going to keep looking better and better and better over the course of the season. When you look back and see that they held Ohio State to a very, very poor performance in Bloomington back in week 1. So I've got them at an A-. I asked all of you that same question. The votes are flying in right now on our weekly podcast poll. You can see it over at the Hoosier Sound or at Indiana HQ over on Twitter. What grade would you give Indiana football? 60% of people agree with you, Matt. They're giving Indiana a grade in the B+, B or B- range. Only 2% of people are agreeing with me as far as ranking Indiana, giving them a little bit of a bump into that A-, A+ tier. 37% of the people are giving Indiana a grade between a C+ and a C-. So that just goes to show you where Indiana fans are right now. The bar continues to be raised higher and higher. I liked a lot of Tom Allen's comments earlier on Monday, listening into his session with the media after Indiana's win and then looking ahead to this Louisville game. Tom Allen's basically was pretty harsh on his team coming out of that game. He said the penalties were needless. We should have shut them out. We can't give up the football in that situation. Said there were some mistakes they could clean up on offense too, even though they put up 41. Walt Bell and Matt Guerrieri carried out that same message. So I like to hear that this Indiana program, which hasn't won too many games over the last couple of years, still holding a very high standard for themselves as they go into Louisville and Akron and then the Big Ten schedule. I did see some breaking news come in just now as it relates to Indiana's series with the Louisville Cardinals. The Hoosiers will be playing Louisville on Saturday. Nothing's changing there, but that'll be the end of the series. So no further games. Indiana did officially buy out of next year's game at Louisville. That's according to Zach Osterman. Indiana will likely add an FCS team instead of Louisville, and I think that's a really good decision. Frankly, I'm sick and tired of seeing Indiana take on Cincinnati and Louisville and Western Kentucky in the non-conference slate. I think I like that in
basketball. I don't like that in football.
In football, get fat. And look, the Big Ten gives you enough problems in football, especially in the Big Ten East era. Tom Allen, feed yourself with some easy wins. and then make sure your team is healthy and put together going into Big Ten play. I don't mind that one bit, as long as the buyout price isn't all that ridiculous. As far as this Louisville game, Matt, we talked about how the Cardinals are 9.5-point favorites. The Cardinals have really good interior offensive line and running backs. Brian Hudson is a name you should get to know. He's the Cardinals center. He is someone who you will hear his name called in the NFL draft. Their guards are really good too. They got some good edge rushers as well. Ashton Gelati is someone that's going to give Indiana's offensive tackles a lot to work with. But with that said, Matt, we talked about Micah McFadden. Indiana's linebacking core is looking like it's really taking a step forward with Aaron Casey, Jacob Mangum-Farrar. Before we give our prediction for this game, give me 2 Hoosiers, maybe one on each side of the ball, that you need to see play really well if Indiana is going to get this win.
Well, okay. So first off, obvious answer is Tayven Jackson. If they're going to win this game, they got to have quarterback play, right?
Bold.
Second player I'll go with. Now, I could go with a skill position player if I wanted to, but I'm going to actually go with an offensive lineman here for offensive line. I think Matthew Bedford's going to have a good game. And I mean that for the offensive line as a whole.
Sure.
Singling out Bedford because Ohio State actually was able to get some decent pressure from his side of the offensive line during the Ohio State game. And Matt's been in the program. I mean, he was a standout freshman at one point in time.
Oh, yeah.
In the program. I mean, as a upperclassman and leader, he needs to be the one actually leading the offensive line and being that rock and being that guy that is a consistent performer. Played very well against an Indiana State team that I think was running, not Division I
basic
type
stuff.
Talent out there, right? So it would have been concerning if he hadn't had a good game, right?
Sure.
I want to see Indiana actually go out and have some push against the Power 5 team from the offensive line.
I like that.
I know, amazing. And then on defense, Aaron Casey, again, he's the leader of the defense. He's the quarterback on defense. That is the obvious answer. My second answer is going to be the DC. I think Matt Guerrieri has to call a really good game, and he's got to do some things to keep Jeff Brom on his toes. Right? Jeff Brom is one of the better offensive minds in college football, right? And you have a defense that looked great against Ohio State, but is still moderately untested, right? Like they're inexperienced, right? You're putting a bunch of pieces together, and you have an offense that is also putting a bunch of pieces together because they have a new coach. Right. Yeah. So you as a play calling mind have to take advantage of that rather than be taken advantage of.
Yeah, neutralize that advantage Louisville will probably think they have coming into this game. I like the couple that you mentioned. For me, on an offensive standpoint, I'm really looking forward to seeing Josh Henderson even more so than Jalen Lucas in this game. I think Indiana is going to be a little bit more of a physical football team on Saturday, whereas Louisville, I think, is going to try to win on speed and athleticism and explosiveness. I think Josh Henderson is someone who really took a step forward against Indiana State compared to the season opener. And that if Indiana kicks field goals in this game, they're cooked. And you look ahead on Saturday afternoon, you're going to have some 3rd and 3s. You're going to have some 4th and 1s. You're going to have some 2nd and mediums. And you're going to need Josh Henderson to move the chains, pick up those yards, keep Louisville honest as far as their defense is concerned. Keep those guys on the field. Give your defensive players some rest over on the sidelines in air-conditioned Lucas Oil Stadium. You want to give Indiana as much upside as possible by giving Josh Henderson the football. And, of course, when you're inside that 5-yard line, he's got a nose for the pylon. He's got a nose for the goal line. Accumulating 9 touchdowns already this season, got on the board against the Sycamores. So I'm really looking forward to seeing Josh Henderson have a very good game. I'm very much excited to see Carter Smith as well as Khalil Benson, both tackles going up against Louisville's edge rushers, including Ashton Gelati that we mentioned before. And then from a defensive standpoint, this secondary, let's go. I mean, Nick Toomer, Philip Dunham, Lewis Moore, new faces, same positions. This secondary, I'm really fired up to see how they handle Louisville's speed explosiveness. Jamari Thrash is someone who you have to pay attention to as far as the field is concerned. But of course, it's not a one-trick pony as far as the Cardinals are concerned. We've seen how Jeff Brom runs his offense in whether it was Purdue or Louisville. Huggins Bruce is a receiver that has been very impressive for Louisville over the course of his time with the Cardinals. Trying to grab his first. Yeah, Amari Huggins Bruce. I knew it was one that I hadn't heard before. And so there's an H. There's an H in Amari. And so, I didn't connect the dots there right away. And so this Louisville offense, dangerous, dynamic, but I want to see the secondary and the offensive tackle step up. And so, Matt, with that said, it's a 9.5 point spread with the over under at 53. So it means if you do the math, it's about a 31-22 Louisville win in Indianapolis on Saturday. Who do you have winning this game and by how much?
I got Louisville winning this game, but I think Indiana is going to keep it closer than I think Indiana will cover, basically. I'm looking at like a 24-20 Louisville win. I think the defense is better than what Vegas thinks.
Okay.
And I think that's going to show up on Saturday.
I like the thought there. You talk about keeping this game close. Brock Travelstead is a kicker for the Louisville Cardinals, who has gotten off to a perfect start this season. He was 4 for 4 as far as his field goals are concerned in week 1. And he's made all of his extra points for the Cardinals this season as well. Brock Travelstead is a guy you got to keep your eye out for here when Louisville puts their kicking unit onto the field. I think Indiana wins this game if it's like week 10. I'll be honest with you. Of course, Indiana wouldn't really play Louisville in week 10.
Right.
But, anything can happen in realignment land. But with that said, with this game in week 3, I do have Louisville coming out on top. And you would think, okay, the first-year head coach should probably need more time to get his program going. Well, it's not really the case with Louisville. Jeff Brom obviously brought over a lot of his guys from Purdue from a players and coaches standpoint, whereas Tom Allen really has the much newer roster than Jeff Brom does when you consider the transfers and the youngsters that play for IU. I think this one might be a little bit more high scoring. I actually believe quite a bit in Tayven Jackson and in Jalen Lucas and in Josh Henderson and in Cam Camper and the entire receiving group. I hope Omar Cooper Jr. continues to get snaps, continues to get playing time along with Donovan McCulley at the wide receiver position. I like the improvements Indiana's offensive line made. But with that said, I think Louisville's going to be a little bit of a problem for this defense from a speed and athleticism standpoint. I got Louisville taking this game 34-27. I think you'll see some points. I think you'll see Indiana go back to the drawing board a little bit defensively, and then, clean up their mistakes against Akron, a 7:30 primetime start, by the way, in a couple of weeks, and then going into Big Ten season. So that's how Matt and I see this game. I can't wait to watch it. If nothing else, I'll tell you this, Matt. Through 2 weeks, Indiana has me intrigued. And I'm not expecting them to win necessarily, even whether it's this game or even if it's the first Big Ten game of the season at Maryland. But they have me interested. And if nothing else, they've said, hey, Nathan, 3.5 hours of your time, think it's worth it. And so I'm like, look, hey, at least I don't have to be watching a turnover machine at quarterback. I don't have to be watching an offensive line that can't stop anything. I don't have to be watching a secondary that's blowing coverages left, right, and center. See a team that's connected, that believes in themselves, that puts the team ahead of the individual. And, we'll see where this goes. A lot of other programs in the league, folks, they got some off the field stuff that's been happening over the last handful of months.
Michigan State.
And a handful of days. You name it. It's not exactly great. Tom Allen, I'm going to continue to give him credit for sort of keeping a steady ship going forward in light of a lot of the stuff that we've seen. But
it's insane to me when I look at the rest of the Big Ten. How inept some of these athletic departments are at vetting the coaches. Like,
I just
vet your staff.
Rutgers,
man.
We talk about Michigan State, talk about Northwestern. We remember the Penn State stuff from about a decade ago. So Rutgers dealt with a lot of financial issues in the world of, expanding to the Big Ten. And I'm sure I'm missing 2 or 3 or 4 things, but Iowa still struggles to score points, but at least they're winning. That's not all that big of a deal. At the end of the day, I'm going to give to, I don't know what the job situation is going to be with Tom Allen next year, a couple of years, 3, I don't know what, but as long as he's the head coach of Indiana, he is representing the school in a fair and professional and acceptable manner. All of this gets back to the original point where for 3.5 hours on a Saturday, I feel like this team is worth my time. And I think a lot of IU fans, just based on our social media interactions, they feel the same way too. So,
Absolutely.
Hey, look, if nothing else, they're worth some time on a Saturday during the day. And I'll tell you, with this week 3 slate coming up, Indiana Louisville might end up being the best game that you can see. So hey, we might even get a little bit more of a national audience here as far as noon on Saturday is concerned. Matt, there are a bunch of Big Ten matchups coming up on Saturday, actually across Friday and Saturday. You've got a bunch of teams that are a little bit all over the place. Illinois with an awful performance at Kansas on Friday. Northwestern got their bounce back win over UTEP as underdogs at home. Maryland a bit awkward against Charlotte early, and then they sort of steered the ship. They turned the ship around and moved in the right direction. A bunch of games. Got 13 games involving Big Ten teams this weekend. It's time for our Big Ten picks of the week, Matt. We like to look and give you 1 or 2 things that we see across the Big Ten slate. And then, we say, hey, look, for all of you listening, if you win, if you tail us, give us credit. If you don't, it's not our fault. What are 1 or 2 Big Ten picks of the week that you like coming up here for week 3, Matt?
All right. Big Ten picks of the week. So I like Penn State covering 14 against Illinois.
Oh, okay.
I think Illinois' defense is garbanzo beans, garbage.
It's not good.
Okay,
yeah.
They are cheeks. Insert any verb you want there. They are just bad.
Yeah.
So take Penn State. I also like Western Kentucky to cover 27 at Ohio State.
Ooh.
They are not losing by 27. We know these Western Kentucky teams can score. I don't think Ohio State can score all that well. So give me the Hilltoppers covering against Ohio State.
Wonderful. I love hearing that. A couple things that you guys could pay attention to there. On this podcast last week, we talked about Northwestern winning straight up. We talked about, there's one other one that I wanted to mention that is escaping me right now. Oh, we talked about taking the under in Iowa State last week, and that one hit because neither team can score. So there's no surprise there. Back to the drawing. Like, I'm taking under 43 in Iowa, Western Michigan. Like, I'm sorry, in Kinnick Stadium, I don't really care. I just don't see. I don't know. I don't think Western Michigan's going to score, and I certainly don't think Iowa's going to get 43. So, I've got under 43 in Iowa, Western Michigan. I'm also going to take Purdue to beat Syracuse straight up at home, West Lafayette, money line. I understand Purdue's got some shortcomings as a football team this year, but I also feel like Ryan Walters has things moving in the right direction. I like the fact that they went into Lane Stadium and beat the Hokies, a team that's not as good as they used to be, but I think Purdue still deserves credit for doing that. So I got the Boilermakers winning straight up there. I got under 43 in Iowa, Western Michigan. And I can't wait to see a bunch of these games kick off. Of course, I know I'm going to be paying attention to Michael Penix against Michigan State on Saturday afternoon. That should be fun watching him and Caitlin DeBoer and Nick Sheridan do their thing for the Huskies as they take on the Spartans. Folks, it's time for our social media shout out as we look around social media and give you something that we'd like to see across the board. There were so many fun moments here. Indiana's women's soccer team continues to do good things. Indiana volleyball had a successful last few games. Of course, you're seeing some Hoosier baseball players make the pros. Andrew Salfrank off to an awesome start with Arizona in the major leagues. All sorts of fun stuff in addition to Micah McFadden, like we talked about earlier. Saw that Eric Gordon was doing some big things as far as international basketball is concerned. So things simply just do not stop as far as the world of social media and Indiana athletics. For us, If you'd like to follow our stuff, make sure you give us a like, a subscribe, a follow at Indiana HQ, as well as at the Hoosier Sound on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. On Instagram, Matt, we're not Indiana HQ, but what are we?
Indiana.HQ, guys.
You can find us there. Yes, so much to talk about. Indiana women's basketball was off and running as far as hosting some official visits. Of course, that's always big time. Indiana, of course, in the men's side, had 3 big time prospects visiting Bloomington, Indiana over the weekend. Matt, let's talk a little bit about the Montverde group of players that came in. Liam McNeeley, Derik Queen, Curtis Givens III. Of course, there's no commitment for us to talk about. There's no letter of intent getting signed. But as we look ahead, Matt, this class of 2024 is starting to get the feeling of one that will define the Mike Woodson era at Indiana. And the first step, right, Matt, is getting some of these guys in-house and having them visit Bloomington first and foremost.
Yeah, we got to get these guys on campus. So for everybody being like, oh, when are they going to commit? Slow the roll for a bit. Like let's chill out. Let's chill out. I will tell you this: McNeeley is closer to committing than like a lot of the national people actually fully expect. But you got to give him time. Got to give him time, guys.
Got to give him time. But Matt, as you see this program, right, as they continue to do good things, whether it's transfer portal, whether it's recruiting high school players, we've talked about this time and time again. The visit is the first step, right? Because right now in the world of social media, there's so much back and forth, there's so much information swirling around. There's so much to do, this, there, everything. But actually getting players of this ilk, whether it's Givens, whether it's McNeeley, the 5-star from Montverde, you name it, Derik Queen, having them actually come into the building, come into the college town, get the IU vibe, especially on a beautiful weekend like you had in Bloomington over the last weekend. That's the type of stuff that can really separate Indiana. Don't you agree?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, we saw it on social media. I mean, Shirley Donovan tweeted about it, right? Like IU having one of the more elite social media strategies, especially post-visit, really means a lot, right? For an IU staff, like they're putting the work and they're doing it in the right ways, and hopefully at the end of the day that will pay off. No, we have yet to see that happen. So far this recruiting cycle, but we've seen it in the past, right? They went and got Malik Renew and Jalen Hood-Schifino. They've gotten the guys that came in this year as freshmen and Tamara Bates, right? Almost immediately upon getting hired.
Yeah.
Tamara didn't turn out as well as the rest of the guys that I've mentioned, or we will see. But either way, I really, really, really like the makeup of this IU team.
Yeah, and I like the fact that, as far as this big time spotlight weekend was concerned, with 3 players who all played different positions, right? You had Curtis Givens, Montverde, of course, but the 4-star point guard, 6'2", 170, Liam McNeeley, 5-star, sort of 3-4 type player, coming in at 6'7". He's the 9th ranked prospect in the class of 2024, according to 24/7 Sports. And then the top ranked player, if you consider the 24/7 Sports rankings, Derik Queen, 6'9" center, also a Montverde prospect. There are a lot of schools in the mix as far as both these players are concerned. Derik Queen could be a little bit of a Big Ten matchup as far as Indiana and Maryland. Curtis Givens, of course, we've got Indiana, who the official visit there, but a wide list of schools considering Givens at this point. And then as far as McNeeley is concerned, Texas is the team that's really pursuing him in hot fashion. Are there any other schools going after these 3 players, Matt, that I may have missed?
You mentioned Kansas. I wasn't.
Yeah, Kansas is in the mix too.
Kansas,
actually, I didn't mention that. So good call out there.
Kansas is in the mix heavy for McNeeley and oh my God, his name is slipping my mind right now.
Is it Cooper Flagg that you're looking at?
Well, Cooper Flagg, but also the center that just visited this
Derik Queen, of course. Derik Queen is the big time prospect there.
Yeah. So Derik Queen, and they're going on campus. I think Derik Queen is also going to visit Houston.
Yep.
Kelvin Sampson.
Yep. Absolutely correct.
So,
Yeah. And so, of course, this is going to be a competition down to the moment that a player signs his letter of intent. And then guess what? That's when you start thinking about transfer portal the following season for all the schools that missed out. Matt, Montverde, obviously a critical part of Indiana's recruiting strategy. You anticipate continuing to see that, correct? Indiana continuing to go after Montverde, IMG Academy, nothing there. He's vigorously nodding his head. So we're going to take that as a yes.
They are trying to corner the market on Montverde players.
There you go. Hey, not a terrible strategy, especially when you consider the number of quality NBA level players that have come from Montverde Academy. And of course, Indiana's already snagged 2 in Jalen Hood-Schifino and Malik Renew. I know all of us can't wait to see Malik take the floor for the Hoosiers in his second season coming up. Matt, we covered a lot of ground here, from football to Tayven Jackson to the Big Ten to IU basketball having some major visits on campus over the course of this last weekend. What are your final thoughts here as we wrap up on this Monday night?
IU basketball is in a great place. Practice starts in 2 weeks. That's exciting. Indiana football took care of business.
2 weeks.
Ooh, 2 weeks. 2 weeks we got practice. Indiana took care of business on the football field, which was nice to see. I would have liked them to have done it a bit cleaner than they did.
Tom Allen wants that too.
Tom Allen is sometimes Tom Allen knows what he's talking about, and sometimes I'm not sure Tom Allen knows what he's talking about. This is one of those times I think he knows what he's talking about. They definitely should have done that cleaner, but we'll forgive them and we move on.
I just keep reminding myself how awful every Saturday it hits me, how absolutely awful the divisional alignment is between the Big Ten East and the Big Ten West in college football.
It's just tragic.
And look, I know a lot of folks are detractors of Tom Allen right now. The win-loss record speaks for itself. It's not like Indiana's destroying Big Ten West teams left, right, and center. But the level of difficulty between the two divisions is embarrassing. And I feel really bad for Maryland. I feel really bad for Michigan State. I feel really bad for Rutgers and Indiana too. Like, this is just not fair to have Michigan and Ohio State and Penn State. And you would think at some point, one of the 3 teams in this league would trip up, but they're all juggernauts. They're all excellent programs. They're well run. They're well coached. They have elite talent. And you're not even seeing like a Clemson level drop off in any of these 3 programs where, okay, Clemson maybe dropped down a tier or 2. None of that's happening with these 3 programs. And in fact, if you want to see anything, was early in the Big Ten East era where Jim Harbaugh was getting Michigan up to speed, where James Franklin was trying to get that transition to Penn State in the best spot possible, which it is right now. I cannot believe
the Big Ten East is currently, Nathan, the best division in college football.
It's
by far
unbelievable. The only team that's lost a game in the Big Ten East is Indiana. And they lost to a Big Ten East team.
Yep.
Illinois, embarrassing loss at Kansas on Friday. Purdue dropped the home matchup against Fresno State. They did bounce back with the nice win at VT. Wisconsin, they looked a tier below Washington State in a game where the Badgers were favored by a touchdown. And Northwestern, I mean, we don't even have to go there. Nebraska's 0-2. I mean, it's not just a close loss at Minnesota. I thought Nebraska was all right in week 1. They looked like they were going slow motion compared to Colorado in week 2. I mean, it is an absolute joke. And I don't know what divisional alignment is going to be like in 2024, but this all circles back to the news that Indiana is opting out of the Louisville series the rest of the way. I get it if I'm Tom Allen. Look, you have your self-interests in mind more than anything else. And Indiana winning football games helps everyone. And for that matter, it's ridiculous how lopsided the East is compared to the West. I can't wait to bet on every Big Ten East team in a cross-divisional matchup the rest of the way. And I don't care if it's Indiana or Rutgers or Maryland. Like, these teams are all, I think, a leg up on the crap that's in the Big Ten West. And I can't wait for Indiana to get itself out of this divisional alignment and meet some new faces and some new teams in the same conference. Because for God's sakes, it is about freaking time. But folks, that about wraps it up for our 306th episode of the Hoosier Sound. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your support. to hear more fantastic episodes like the one you heard today, make sure to follow us over at Indiana HQ on social media, as well as at the Hoosier Sound. You can also head over to our website, indianahq.com, to find it all in one place. But as always, thank you for listening, Hoosier Nation, and we will see you next time.
Peace and love. Go Hoosiers.